In part two of this video about Aristotle, we're going to see how everything we talked about applies to human beings. So in the other video, we had identified Aristotle's four causes. If you remember, they were the material cause, the formal cause, the efficient cause, and the final cause. And I had said that for Aristotle, the most important cause is the final cause. And we had that example of the statue, that the material it's made of is marble, the formal cause would be the shape of the statue, the efficient cause would be the sculpture that created the statue and how they did that, and the final cause would be the purpose of the statue, if it's celebrate a victory in war and so forth. In the last video, I also said that for Aristotle, the most important cause would be the final cause. Now let's see how this applies to human beings. So the four causes apply to everything, including human beings. So in order to explain what a human being is, we also have to answer those four questions. So the material cause for a human being, Aristotle thought that it was that they had a physical body and that they had a thinking soul. Like we saw the three parts of the soul, human beings had a thinking soul. The formal cause would be the design, that how the thinking soul interacts with the material body. The efficient cause would be that they make decisions by reasoning and making plans and building character. And their final cause would be what he called Eudaimonia, the good life or a life well lived. One little exercise that I like to do in class to understand this concept of eudaimonia is to ask the students, why are you taking this class? Some students say they are taking the class because they're trying to get a degree or work towards their degree. Others say it is because they want to learn more about philosophy. But then the next question is, why do you want a degree? Or why do you want to learn more about philosophy? Many students say that they want a degree because they want a better job. They want a better job so that they can have enough money to live. But to live how? To live well. They want a good job so they can live well. We are all looking for the same thing, a life well lived, or what Aristotle called the good life. Even students that are taking this class just to learn about philosophy, they believe that learning can lead to a better life, a life where you understand the history of thought and what the great thinkers accomplished is a better life than one lived in ignorance. Aristotle's point was simple. People may have different conceptions of the good life, but they're all looking for it. Eudaimonia is the final goal of all mankind. So human beings also have a final goal or a purpose. A good and excellent human being is the one that fulfills that purpose. Anything that facilitates achieving the final goal for a human being is part of the good for a human being. Remember, this was the teleological view of the world. There is only one purpose for each kind of thing, Aristotle taught, and the function of a kind is what distinguishes a normal, mature member of its kind from other normal, mature members of their kind. In part one, we had talked about the three parts of the soul, and what distinguishes human beings is thought and reflection. That's what distinguishes us from other animals. So therefore, the way to achieve our final goal of eudaimonia is going to have to include thought and reflection. It may seem that Aristotle is saying that any view of the good life will be equally valid and will allow one to reach eudaimonia. This is not so. Aristotle will explore four types of concepts that at the time were thought to lead to eudaimonia, and he will argue that they do not lead to it at all. Aristotle is going to argue that there are four concepts of the good life that we know do not work, do not lead to eudaimonia. The first one's a life of pleasure. The second one's a life of honor. The third one is a life of accumulating wealth. And the fourth one is a life of pure virtue. And I'll go through each one of these one at a time. Let's start with a life of pleasure. A life of pleasure, Aristotle says, will not work for a very simple reason. As we have seen, human beings have three parts of the soul: the vegetative soul, the sensitive soul, and the rational soul. A life of pleasure is not enough for a human being because it only engages the vegetative soul and the sensitive soul. It does not engage the rational soul. So Aristotle didn't have anything against pleasure, but he just pointed out that pleasure is not enough. All right, second one, a life of honor. Imagine that you are the advertisement creative person who created this ad. More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. And imagine you won an award for this. Yet you know that cigarettes cause cancer, and you're not happy about having created this ad. Would that award, that honor, bring you any satisfaction? Aristotle would say no. If you're not okay with what you're doing, receiving honors for it is not going to replace that feeling of satisfaction with being okay with what you're doing. The next type of life that Aristotle is going to analyze is a life of accumulating wealth. Now here he's not talking about living comfortably, he's talking about accumulating a lot of wealth. And his argument is very simple. When people want a lot of money, he says, it's either to enjoy a lot of pleasures or to acquire honors through being admired by others. But as we've seen already, these two strategies do not lead to eudaimonia. Money does not replace you being satisfied with your life. So if you make a lot of money doing something that you're very much comfortable with, that's great. But if you're sacrificing something in order to make a lot of money, the end result is not going to be eudaimonia. Let's go to the last type of life that Aristotle thinks does not lead to eudaimonia, a life of pure virtue. So what Aristotle says is that if you try to be too saintly, it won't work because attempts at being perfectly virtuous at everything you do will lead to limiting your action. And as we'll see soon, a good character can only be constructed by action. Okay, so then if none of these types of life are going to lead to eudaimonia, what is going to lead to eudaimonia? Let's look at the word eudaimonia again. Eudaimonia is a Greek word that sometimes is translated as happiness, but it is better translated as flourishing. Eudaimonia is not simply feeling happiness. It is a life well lived. For instance, Aristotle said that you only know if your life was excellent at the end of your life when you look back. In order to achieve eudaimonia, what you need to do is acquire the virtues. There are two kinds of virtues for Aristotle. There are intellectual virtues, these can be taught, and there are virtues of character. And he's going to say that these cannot be taught, they can only be exemplified. They have to be worked out by each person. Intellectual virtues for Aristotle, they can be taught. You can have as much of them as you want. In fact, you should learn them your whole life. He liked to categorize everything, so he categorized the intellectual virtues as well. So he categorized them into scientific understanding, which was understanding of the material world, art, the ability to make things, practical wisdom, judgment, and common sense, plus intuitive reason, insight into basic truths. These two together would combine to create philosophical wisdom. These you can learn by studying and taking classes for your entire life. Virtues of character, on the other hand, they cannot be taught, and you're also not born being virtuous. Being virtuous for Aristotle involves doing the right thing at the right time, towards the right people, for the right reasons. So it's pretty complicated, and we'll see some examples as we go along. All right, let's see this example. Imagine our friend went to the hairdresser, and she's very excited about her new hairstyle. And she shows up and talks to us, shows her hairstyle and asks, do you like it? Imagine we don't like it. What do? Are you going to be honest or are you going to be kind? The answer to this will depend on who you are, who your friend is, and the specific circumstances that you're looking at. So for instance, imagine that you said, I will be honest. I would always be honest with my friend. But then imagine that your friend was depressed for 6 months and they show up with this new hair and it's the first time you've seen them smile for 6 months. In that case, you would probably be kind, I'm going to guess. Because, why not if they've been depressed for 6 months? But on the other hand, now imagine that they have a job interview coming up in a couple of days. And you know that this job is not going to like your friend's new hairstyle. Then in that case, maybe you have to be honest. So Aristotle's point was that what you would do in a situation is going to depend on the circumstances. However, even though it depends on the circumstances, there's a general rule we can use. He called that the golden mean. And the golden mean is the most famous ethical proposal by Aristotle. His claim is that when we look at any action, the virtuous thing to do is somewhere in the middle, and the excesses at both ends are vices. So this challenges the idea of good and bad. What he says is the virtuous thing is in the middle, say courage is in the middle. Too much courage is going to be rashness. Too little courage is going to be cowardice. So a deficiency of courage is a vice, and an excessive courage is a vice. Now, Aristotle talked about the golden mean, and he talked about different virtues that he considered that were in the middle. And in his book, Nicomachean Ethics, he goes through different types of virtues. He talks about courage, generosity, ambition, modesty, and friendship. Friendship is actually very important because it is in friendship that we can practice the other virtues more. So with our friends, it's easier to be courageous and generous, and etc. So friendship is a very, very important virtue. And as you can see, for all these virtues, too much of it is a vice and too little of it is a vice as well. And you will see in your assignment that you probably will find the virtues that you care about will also match this definition. All right. So when we perform an action, he said, you have to do it for the right reasons at the right time towards the right people. The reason why you have to do this is because only when you have the right reasons are you going to be able to consistently do that action and build your character. So intention for Aristotle is important. For instance, an example I like to give is if I give money to a homeless person because they were making an annoying noise, that's not going to make me a better person because next time I see a homeless person, I'm probably not going to be giving them money again unless they're making that noise. So I want to give money because I want to help. Because if I do that, I will do that over and over again and I'll create a good character that way. At this point, you may be thinking, okay, why can't this be taught? It seems like Aristotle just taught me what virtue is. And here's the problem. The reason why, and we already touched upon this a little bit, the reason why the virtues can't be taught is because The middle, the golden mean, is not going to be the same in every situation and is not going to be the same for every person. So imagine in a situation of war, a courageous action is going to be very different from a courageous action in a situation of peace. So that middle is going to be different depending on the situation. On the other hand, um, when you're trying to decide what to do, you also have to know yourself really well in your character and to know where you're deficient or excessive. So, for instance, if you are very shy and you tend to never speak up in a public setting, for instance, you know that you have a deficiency there. Therefore, when you're in a public setting, you should try to speak up as much as you can every time. On the other hand, if you're an extrovert and you tend to kind of always speak way too much and not let others speak, then the right thing for you to do is to rein it down and not speak. So the middle point is going to be different depending on the circumstances, and it's going to be different depending on your character. And this was why virtue cannot be taught. In order to develop your character, you have to work on your virtues and create virtuous habits, is what Aristotle thought. If you create a practice to moderate your action depending on the circumstances and using self-knowledge as your guide, you can develop your character. When you're young, if you have good role models, you may develop good habits of character by following them. If you did not have that good luck, you will need to work on this as an adult. And you should know that it is difficult to create new habits. You're going to have to act consistently for a long time. In order to create a good character, you will need to fine-tune your virtues. And virtues of character are like physical fitness or playing an instrument. You can learn about it, but unless you practice, you won't be fit or you won't be able to play. First, you need to create virtuous habits by acting a certain way consistently. And second, you need to adjust your personality and to your personality and as your personality and your circumstances change. If you consistently work on your virtues, you most likely will achieve eudaimonia, or the good life. Working on the virtues allows you to both work on yourself and not affect others in a negative way, since behaviors in the extremes of deficiency or excessiveness usually either hurt you or others or both. But there's an exception. So if you need to exercise the virtues in order to reach eudaimonia. It is a necessary condition to reach eudaimonia for a life well lived. However, this is not sufficient for eudaimonia, because if towards the end of your life something happens, for instance, and all of your family lives, or you lose all your possessions, then at the end of your life you won't look back and think, I reached eudaimonia. Luck can prevent someone from reaching eudaimonia, but since we can't control it, there's nothing we can do about it. That's it for this class. I hope you enjoyed learning about Aristotle, and see you in the next class.